So you can see after I get my drawing in, the first thing that I do is I block out the entire scene with big shapes of flat color. And this is going to make the rest of the painting so much easier. And I always tell my students at this part, at the end of this stage here, even though it's very simple, the painting should be working to a certain degree and you should like it. All right, welcome to Paint Coach. If you're new to the channel, my name is Chris Fornatero and I help thousands of students every single month get better at painting through my online courses and tutorials. Now, this video here is the third video in a series where I break down my process of painting a landscape. If you're looking at this and wondering like why I chose this photo in particular, that was the first video in the series. And then if you're looking at this and be like, wow, Chris, like you changed the whole composition really. There's like not many trees here. The path is taking up more space. You changed the dappled light. You know, there's not as much sky. Why did you do all that? Well, that is the second video where I talk about composition and how I do a simple study using value markers. So if you haven't seen those yet, highly suggest checking those out first. Now, back to this painting. What I was saying was getting everything in with just flat color like this, you should like it at this point. And if you don't like it at this point, you need to change the values and color so it's working. Like right now, even though there's no detail, the light effect is still working. What needs to look like it's in shadow looks like it's in shadow. What needs to look like it's in light looks like it's in light. And I can move on from here. You know, you don't want to move on from this stage if it's not looking right, because it's going to be a lot harder to change it later when you start adding stuff onto it. Also, this stage, the paint is relatively thin. Now, I didn't use any medium painting this. So if you struggle with painting, using medium, you don't understand how to use it, don't use it. You don't need it. If you like it, use it. If you don't, then don't. But here, the way I thin the paint is I use very, very little probably of my Gamsol mineral spirits, but mainly I just push the paint further on the canvas. It's not transparent by any means, but it's not extremely thick. They always say you want your shadows to look like you can reach through them, so like thinner, and your lights to be, thick and have substance to it. I always like to say there's three things that I do when I am building a painting. One, I work dark to light, I work thin to thick, I work big to small. But there's also a fourth, I guess, which is working easy to hard. It's a lot easier to get this in first than just trying to shoot straight for that. So next thing that I do is I get in the reflected blue light from the sky. Now, if you're like, Chris, like, what do you mean the reflected blue light from the sky? You can see in the photo that obviously, this is all in shadow, and it's in shadow from, the trees that are all around it. This is actually a photo I took when I was hiking in Jackson, Wyoming. And you can see a little bit in the photo that things get bluer, especially with this path. You can see like a lot more blue right there than opposed to here. And that's because more of this blue sky is coming down into the shadows. This isn't getting hit with direct sunlight, but the sky's still overhead. It's not as much here because, there was more tree coverage above me, where I was standing taking this photo. So I know, okay, with this ground and with this grass, I need to push the blue more here and have it progressively get less there. That's just going to help give the illusion of this sunlight here, having this, you're getting further away from the darkness of the woods into the light, more reflected blue light. That's also happening on the trees here. Something to know with landscapes is that objects like, say these trees in sunlight, when things are in sunlight, a lot of times the lights are going to be warm and the shadows are going to be cool. And in the shadows, it's the reverse. The shadows are going to be warmer and the lights are going to be cooler. For example, in this, the lights are cooler because it's just the blue light from the sky above. Now, you're probably looking at this and being like, Chris, like, I don't see that at all. It's just like black to me. That's why I always say that landscape painting is a translation process, not a copying process. And probably the one thing that I wish somebody would have told me early on is that you cannot copy the photo exactly, and that you need to focus on learning why things happen in a landscape, or how light works, because it's going to help you fill in gaps. Like here, I didn't want to paint these trees exactly like they are because they're thin. There's like it's not a lot of little branches. I like, all right, I just want to keep this simple. It's in the corner of my painting. The last thing I want is like a whole bunch of like small detail and shapes in the corner of my painting, keeping the eye there. I want to keep it simple, but I still want it to read. And, I just want to fill out these pine trees. And so since I know how light works, I know how to paint in the pine branches, even though they're not really there in the reference, and get them to work. So another thing with the reflected blue light is you see this rock here, and just putting that little bit of blue light on there is going to start to give that rock form. I also put the shadow under there as well. You can see in the first frame, it's just flat, but just putting literally 2 values, it's starting to look more like a rock. And come down here, the cool thing about understanding how the light works is it makes it very easy to add things in that aren't there, like this stick or branch. Since I know that it's going to be getting that blue light from the top, and I know there's going to be, you know, this shadow on the ground right here, like it makes it easy to simply paint in something like that. And I just thought it was cool, and an extra little device, you know, kind of pulling you into the painting. There's also the introduction of dappled light right here. And there's just things you need to know about dappled light in order to paint it. One is that the direction of the light is going to be affected by the direction that the sun is shining. Like here, I think the sun was coming down pretty much just straight down from above, maybe a little bit from the left, but you can see the light, it's just these spots just shining like kind of, you know, just straight down on it. Whereas a lot of times you might have seen dappled light that's a lot more elongated. That's because the sunlight is coming from the side, and the shapes of the light that are going to be on the ground are going to go in the direction that the light is shining. So knowing that, it makes it easy for me to just kind of put it where I want and to help it kind of lead the viewer's eye through the painting. I'm also careful not to make any of these shapes of dappled light the same size or length. You know, this is a certain size, this one's like a little thicker, you know, this one's shorter. And so that's going to help a lot. It's also fun to, when you're painting dappled light, to carry it across different surfaces. You wouldn't want to just like paint it on the ground here and then just stop. You know, you put in some of the grass, just continue it a little bit. It's really fun to go over a lot of things, like here goes there and it goes over the stick and then continues on the ground as well. Also, there's a lot of soft edges. I paint all these alla prima, meaning like everything's always wet, painted in one sitting. I actually painted it for a tutorial on Patreon. So if you want to see the full tutorial, along with hundreds of others, check out my Patreon page. Link to that is in the description of this video. As I was saying, like this dark purple paint was wet when I put in these shapes of dappled light. So I was able to get some soft edges on them, which is going to help with communicating it as light. And then by the end here, it was just kind of like touching in some details. I kind of put in a few little light branches there in the distance, pushed a little more blue light in these rocks reflected from the sky, put some little negative shapes, kind of seeing through these trees a little bit. That's always fun to do. Yeah, fun painting. It was a little 8 by 10 inch painting. Took me around an hour to do, but it all starts with blocking it out with the big flat shapes. And again, working easy to hard, dark to light, thin to thick, and big to small. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.